I'm Barbara Kraft, granddaughter of Herbert Birdsall. A bunch of ranchers and their kids showed up with hand-post diggers, handsaws, hammers, and nails. And in 1956, they built the Blaisdell Rodeo grounds. One of these ranchers was Herb Birdsall. Herb was an icon who grew ranching and rodeo into a family business that he passed to the next generations and is still growing today. Edgar and Alberta Birdsall came to North Dakota in 1902. They were bold and resourceful. They stuck it out and were able to make a living from the land. In 1904, their third son Herb was born on the family farm north of Berthold. Herb grew up farming with horses alongside his dad and two brothers, and they were known as Birdsall Farms. Of the Birdsall brothers, Herb was the cowboy. Herb met his complement in the neighbor girl Mildred Wixer. Mildred was kind and soft-spoken. She had a toughness mixed with sensibility and understood matters on the other side of the fence line. Herb and Mildred married in 1926, and in 1935 they bought a ranch southwest of Berthold. They were optimists and hard workers. With their daughters Jerry, Eleanor, and Merle, they carved out a ranching life. Herb and Mildred planned realistically for changing times. They attended cattle shows such as the Valley City Winter Show and State Fair to learn and observe the developing trends and innovations in the industry. Herb didn't strive for recognition or acclaim. His goal was his family. He raised his daughters as ranchers. Working hard was a natural for them. They were at home in the outdoors and in the kitchen. They gave of themselves to the community, promoted rodeos, were active in the North Dakota Cattlewomen, and won in politics. He had confidence in them, planning for the future. He kept acquiring land for their own places. In 1950, his son-in-law Darrell became his partner. Many young men got to start working for Herb. They must have liked him. They stayed on for years, and when they married, Herb had a place for them to live as they started their new lives. Herb shared his talents with his grandchildren as he worked with us all on horses. He didn't have any trophy buckles or saddles. He was the backbone. He guided us all in our first competitive events. He took us to the horse and cattle sales. Little did we know at the time, he was teaching us the skills needed to survive in life and business. Like all ranchers, Herb had the concern, horses, cattle, and weather. He was a 36-year member of the North Dakota Stockmen's Association. Herb and Mildred were two people that weren't afraid to expand. In 1968, along with the Meyer family, they purchased the Figure 4 Ranch at Watford City, North Dakota. Some have tamed the West. By using sound business decisions, Herb captured it. As the Blaisdell Rodeo makes a lasting impression, so does the legacy of Herb Birdsall.
You know, I'd really like, excuse me, I'd really like to thank Barb for getting us going. Whether Herb gets elected or not, it's something for our kids and our grandkids, so it's a little hard. I guess one of the hardest things to do is speak about someone you grew up loving and respecting, and try to express that to people how much that means to you. Herb wasn't Herb Birdsall, his grandpa. It shouldn't sound like a eulogy, but it kind of does when I start reading it. When I was typing it at home, it looked a lot better. You know, him and Dad started Birdsall Meyer farms and ranches, and there wasn't anything, I don't think, ever written down on a piece of paper. Nobody ever had to argue about whose was this, whose was that. Grandpa always just said, it's ours. Everything was ours. When he gave you his word about something, it was good, and we were brought up that way. Shirley always said he had Irishman's Alzheimer's. He'd forget everything except a grudge. If he got a little bit mad at you, boy, it was going to last as long as he lived. He wasn't ever going to forgive you. I told some of the stories in the deal there, and I'd rather not even read what I wrote here, but the way he thought was kind of the way I wish a lot of people would think. One time, my brother Lynn tells, they were riding in the big pasture, him and Grandpa. We always got to ride with Grandpa. In the middle of the big pasture, a guy owned a quarter of land. him and Herb never saw eye to eye. He would never rent that to Grandpa, and Grandpa could never buy it. And they're out riding one day, and this guy comes with a load of yearlings to jump in there. Just, I mean, this is back when you had a 16-foot truck with a load of yearlings. And they were riding, and so they stopped to visit with this guy when he unloaded those yearlings. Helped him unload the yearlings and kick him into this guy's quarter of land. As soon as he drove over the hill, and Grandpa said to Lynn was, 10, 12 years old, he said, "Come on, we got to get a couple of them cattle out of here." Well, Lynn said, "Why are we going to get them out?" He said, "We're going to put them in our pasture across the fence." Lynn said, "Why are we going to do that?" And Grandpa said, "Well, that guy's a hell of a lot easier to get along with if his cattle are in ours when ours get in his." He was always way ahead of the game. And I told the one story, you can read it in there, about we're calving some heifers, and I'm staying down at the Tronson place with Grandpa and Grandma. And we had kind of our set schedule there, where I was going to school at Berthel. It's about 15 miles. We're kind of out in the middle of nowhere up in that country. And we're watching the 10 o'clock news. We'd always watch Gunsmoke and have a bowl of ice cream with chocolate on it. And then watch the news, and I'd check the heifers and go to bed because I had to go to school, and then he'd take a check in the middle of the night. We're watching the 10 o'clock news, and it came over the news that a couple guys had escaped from the jail in Minot. And they're armed and dangerous and supposed to be in the Berthold area, so everybody take their keys out of their vehicles. So I go down and check the heifers after the news and pull the keys out of the old pickup we had there, and there was a pickup in a car, and I pulled those keys out, take them in and throw them on the table, and told Grandpa I brought the keys in. I get ready for bed, and he says, "Well, better go put those keys back in the vehicle." I said, "Well, them guys are supposed to be in this area." He said, "Yeah, if they are." He said, "I don't want them to have to come in the house to look for the keys." But I bring it back to a little bit about his horses. I wrote in that deal about the horses he rode, and he always, we were trying to raise good horses, and we always rode a lot of pretty good horses, we thought. And Grandpa, he'd never pay any attention to papers. He said, "Papers don't ride." He said, "I ride the horses." And dang, he rode some good horses. They'd walk and watch a cow, and a lot of times we had a little pasture we keep heifers in. You'd go out with a spotlight and shine it on them heifers and find something calving, and if you took one of Grandpa's horses, you knew you were going to get it to the barn in the dark. You could shut the lights off and just hang on, you're going to get there. They got a lot of miles put on them. So we spent a lot of time together, either rodeoing, and he wouldn't forgive a man for being lazy, but he'd damn sure forgive you if you had to go roping or go to a rodeo or ride bucking horses. And Barb's dad, Leroy, and I missed a few days of work when we went roping. We didn't win much money, but we had a lot of fun. Grandpa never seemed to mind that. As long as you had a horse in the trailer or pickup, you were going, that was fine. Well, I hope he gets in the Hall, but if not, he's already in the Grandpa Hall of Fame, so that's pretty important.
My back's a little better than Dean's. I can stand up straight here. Try to. I'm Ryan Hanna. I was a great-grandson of Herb through Dean's sister, Gail Meyer Hanna. And like Dean said, he was always Grandpa, and I was fortunate enough to know him. I think my first memories are when I was 3 years old. I got the taste of the hard work Dean and Barb talked about, because I got to go with him because I had to carry the medication. So every morning, all through the summer months, well, even before school time, but I got to carry the nitroglycerin pills. And we'd go for a ride. Just last spring, I'm not going to say we were cussing him, but we had a discussion about Grandpa Herb as we were fixing some fence that my dad recalled dragging home behind the pickup from some old drift fence some neighbor wanted down. We're still fixing it today. But a word I'd like to use is, as I've grown up and come to know, like Dean said, Herb, and the Birdsall Meyer name was, you learn as you grow up, was very well respected around the community, and it was nice to know anywhere I went, you know, when you mention a last name, it's nice to know that people always want to talk about Herb and the respect they had for Herb. All his hired men that are still alive through today, you'll never hear them say a bad word about him. And they all talked about his love for horses. That was his first passion, and cattle, I think, was a means to use a horse. My grandpa Darrell Meyer was talking to me yesterday about Herb used to winter horses for people. They'd come from all over the place and bring them for someone to kind of keep track of them through the winter, and then if they were sale type horses, they'd get shipped in the spring. There was a rail yard load out facility there in Berthold. But anyway, like I said, I recall him as a visionary. Like Barb said, he had 3 daughters, and he built from scratch. He moved away from his brother's farming industry to start his cattle and horse business, and he built it up for all 3 of his daughters to have and follow, and I was happy to know him. Thank you.